Live.
Good evening and welcome to Three Wide. I'm Rick. I'm joined tonight by Anthony and Peter. It has been a while. We have had a lot going on in our individual lives, but we've got an awful lot to talk about tonight here on Three Wide. First of all, let's catch our audience up with where we've been. For me, hopefully it shows a little bit. I still have some of it left. I was sunning myself down at Disney World. A little disappointed that they took the track out down there. I know Ben wanted to hop in a car and test it, but that's been gone for a number of years. But it was nice to be in the sun, and then we come back to all this rain here in southern New England. So I've been away for the better part of a week, back on track now, and happy to be with all of you tonight. Anthony, what you been doing the past couple of weeks?
Other than watching a phenomenal All Star race in 600, preparing for the new little one to make her grace into the world. Last weekend we had my wife's baby shower, so it was a lot of build up and preparation for that, way more than I would have anticipated. But other than that, just enjoying a great Memorial Day weekend with friends and family, watching some exciting racing, and gearing up for Pocono.
Well, as if the new arrival of a blessed event isn't enough, and if hanging out with Mickey and friends isn't enough, our friend Peter has a story to tell us that is just phenomenal. And Peter, what you've been up to the past couple of weeks? Tell our viewers how exciting the past couple of weeks have been for you.
Oh man, the last weekend was really exciting. I got to go to Philadelphia for the first time with the eighth grade senior class. Got to see a bunch of historic sites and take them all around town. It was really, really fun. I'm gonna miss those kids. I knew I was gonna miss them well before we went on that trip, but they're such a great group, and they really appreciated the history. We had a lot of fun, and that was awesome in and of itself. There were certain things that I got to see for the first time that, as a history buff and history teacher, I was absolutely blown away. It was really awesome. And then pretty much right from that trip, I took the trip out to Eastern Illinois University, where my younger brother has just graduated with his master's degree in sports communications. Parents couldn't venture out there while he was going to school. He didn't want to wait for a barbecue or anything of that sort. And he was like, I want to do something really cool for my graduation, but I don't know what I want to do. And we started having a conversation, and I said, well, you're down there for the Indy 500. It's only 2 hours away. I know you're not a racing guy, but would you ever consider going to that? Maybe I could work something out. I'll get you a ticket. You could take a friend. And he was like, well, I really don't have any friends that I don't know if we're going to go or not going to go. Thinking about going with somebody, but I don't know. And I said, hey, what would be weird? Let me see if I could work it out. Maybe I'll, road trip across the country and come see you. And he was like, would you really do that? And I was like, for you, I would absolutely do this. Not for the Indy 500. I was like, as awesome as it is, I want to do something with my brother. So we worked it out. I got some tickets right on the front stretch so he could see the pit stops for the first time. I drove the 12 to 13 hours or so with stopping right from Philly to get over there. Miscalculated with the time change. I was like, I'm really close. And all of a sudden I saw on the GPS the time changed. Finally got to my brother. He was so excited to see me. I got to meet some of his friends who were really as cool as they come. And then took him to the Indy 500 the next day, and it absolutely blew his mind. He is now a racing fan. He may not admit it right up front, but he was blown away. It was such a wild finish. You couldn't have scripted it any better for somebody who had never been to a auto race in person. And I heard him in the background when we finally got back to his dorm, watching highlights from it. So I know he's definitely hooked, and it was just such an awesome experience to turn around and then come drive back home the next day and then get right back to school. It's been surreal. I told some of my coworkers this morning, actually, I'm like, I still can't believe I was in Indianapolis at the 500 with my brother, and now I'm back here teaching, and school year's coming to an end. It's been wild. And then on top of that, Philly. So it was really, really crazy. The Camaro definitely got to work out, that's for sure. But it was awesome the whole way. I am so thankful for the opportunity, and to see my brother's face made it so worthwhile.
That is probably one of the neatest stories I've ever heard, going to the Indy 500 for the first time. We talked a little bit off air about how the 500 is one of those iconic sports events that really is a once in a lifetime thing. It's right up there with obviously the Daytona 500 and other sporting events like the Kentucky Derby, the Super Bowl, the college basketball Final Four, things like that. So I'm really glad you had a chance to go, and I'll tell you what, you saw a great race, and what's probably more important is it didn't rain. They were expecting an absolute disaster, and you brought them good luck, Peter. I'm sure of that.
I have a funny story for that if you guys could spare a moment.
Sure.
As I'm driving in, I get to Indiana and I see it's about 2 hours to go, and the skies go black. So I said, "Hey, Mother Nature, I'm going to level with you right now because the forecast still said about 90% showers for Sunday. The local radio stations were all talking about it. Everybody was very worried. So I'm like, hey, Mother Nature, it looks dark over there. If you're going to do it, do it. Get it out of your system, please. Just do it today." I was like, I don't care how bad it gets. Just get it out of your system today, please. Don't do it for the Indy 500. I said, I want my brother to see this race more than anything else. I said, it would be really cool to see it, myself. But I was like, I want him to see this race. And all of a sudden, the skies, it just came down in buckets, like Florida-esque type rain. Nobody could see. Hazards were on. And all of a sudden, I looked and I was like, you literally took me for word. So I'm like, this is what I asked for. So I'm like, now you got to hold up your end of the bargain and please don't rain tomorrow. So the whole day, Sunday at the Indy 500, I was like, she's holding up her bargain. She's holding up her bargain. It was backing up.
That just added to the whole environment, and I'm so happy you had an opportunity to go there and hang out with your brother, and now we have a new race fan, and really here on 3 Wide, that's what we're kind of about is building race fans, talking NASCAR for the most part, but building race fans kind of one at a time. So real happy to have your brother on board with all of us now, as becoming as passionate as we are about motorsports. Tonight, as I said, we have a tremendous show planned for you. We're going to talk about, obviously, the All-Star weekend, the package that we saw, the racing during the All-Star race. And then, obviously, this past Sunday, we want to talk about the Coke 600, NASCAR's longest race, talk about the racing, talk about the results, talk about the package, and what has become a very popular topic here on 3 Wide, and that is the evolution of this package and the ever increasing positive results in the racing product from track to track and week to week. We're also going to talk a bit about how we see that package affecting this week's racing at the Tricky Triangle at Pocono Raceway. We'll talk a little bit about the 600 and whether perhaps it should be reduced. There has been over the past few years a desire to reduce some of the races. We're going to talk a little bit about whether the Coke 600 is one of those iconic races that really shouldn't be touched. We'll also talk about, and this comes up once a year and everybody talks about it, what is known as the double. Now, if you are a racing fan like we are, you know what the double means when you say that. It means, for our newer viewers and newer race fans, the double means in one day, racing at the Indianapolis 500, hopping on a plane and getting down to Charlotte, North Carolina to race in the Coke 600. We'll talk a bit about who we think might be a good candidate to do that, who might the next candidate be to race at both Indy and Charlotte on Memorial Day weekend. We'll also talk about one of our good drivers in the sport, who thus far has had a very good points year, but not such a good year as far as his ability to get into victory lane, and that's Kevin Harvick. We'll talk a bit about him and what we've seen thus far. And while we're on that topic, we'll talk a little bit about where we are at this juncture of the season. We are exactly halfway through the regular season. We are 13 races in. What can we expect over the next 13 races? And who really has to step up over these last 13 weeks of the regular season? So it's a full plate tonight. We'll get through these topics as best we can. If you have any questions, comments, etc., obviously use the comment box to do that. I know that Anthony and usually Peter also monitor the comments that are being made. So please feel free to comment. All of your views are valued. And if you have a question, if you're a newbie to auto racing or in particular NASCAR, and you have a question, by all means, ask it. So to kick things off, let's talk about the All-Star Weekend and the package that we saw. Anthony, what are your thoughts about what we saw 2 weeks ago at Charlotte?
The All-Star package, I was skeptical about. I wasn't sure exactly what their aim was. We all knew it was an experimentation for Gen 7, or that's what we've kind of been led to believe lately. I was really impressed with the All-Star package. The racing that it produced and the battles that we saw, I think you have to look at as a twofold. It's a part of the package that they introduced with the vents in the hood in the engine hood, and it's also a matter of they were 20 lap runs, and you knew you could use everything you needed to out of the tires, so the drivers didn't really need to manage the cars, and there was no points involved. Um, but I think a big reason why that racing was so exciting for the All Star race for the Open was because of the package. We saw great side by side racing. We saw kind of what we saw in Kansas, where drivers were using the air to block other runs, which I have no problem with. A lot of the negativity around this package lately has been that you can't get up to the bumper of another car. And you know what? If that's just the way that the racing package is, and find a way to race somebody. And right now, it seems like the way to race is if you get in the advantageous position, you got to mirror drive, you got to take the air off the guy. But that's also not to say that now the driver behind has the options to pick a different lane and be able to get that momentum going to create passes. I think one thing we saw in the All-Star package that we didn't see in the 600, and this is all I'll touch on the 600 for now, is that you are able to make a quicker pass with the All-Star package, meaning that it didn't seem like you had to set up or gain the momentum 2 or 3 laps beforehand to really experiment or to try to test out a line to create a pass. It seemed like with the All-Star package, if you got that clean lane and you I guess either outgunned or outsmarted the driver in front of you from tricking him into blocking your lane, you were able to do that within the last turn or the last 4 turns of the segments. So I think the All-Star Open package is a step in the right direction. I think the cars looked really cool with the hood openings too. Just to have those little scoop indents, I think it's something that NASCAR can definitely take and run with if they choose to. From an aesthetic like feeling or cosmetic feeling, I think it was pleasing to the eye. It was pretty cool to see those cars have that opening. The racing was great. To see Kyle Larson finally burst out of that bubble in the event that he won was really nice to see. I'm sure it was a big confidence booster. I know we had a really, really, really tough week the next week. But hopefully the victory that he took in the last segment of the Open and the All-Star race, winning that million, feeds to his momentum because he's got some pretty good tracks coming up.
Peter, your thoughts on the All-Star race that we saw at Charlotte?
I thought it was an excellent event from the get-go. The package that they rolled out, as Anthony pointed out before, it clearly showed that the cars can get a good run. Competition was tight. Seemed like everybody really stayed close together. I also was a fan of the air vent opening on the hood. I thought it was a really cool look. I want to see the cars with this type of package be able to suck up to each other and run really, really tight. Very similar to the 2018 Open races to get into it, or as Kyle Larson called them, the B mains. I thought those races were great. I remember texting you guys as we were watching them unfold, and like William Byron, door slamming Bubba Wallace to race his way in. You have Ryan Preece and Daniel Hemrick taking each other out. It was just aggressive, awesome, exciting. You saw people at Charlotte were either standing up or hands on the fence, like just getting into it. That's what you want to see. The emotion from Bubba racing his way in and then crying and getting a hug by Ryan Blaney, his best friend, was truly awesome to see. I had so much fun, and the big race didn't even start yet. Larson racing his way in. Bowman, who I felt deserved with his recent performance, getting the fan vote to really have another stout car in the running for the All-Star race was really awesome. It was a great testament by Chevy to put 4 cars into the transfer spots to get in to the All-Star race as well. That was really awesome to see. But just the race under the lights for the $1 million was awesome. You had a lot of comers and goers. It looked like it was contested all throughout, and to see Kyle Larson, as Anthony stated before, be able to pull it away, send it in deep, take the lead back after a couple of restarts, and then just go for it was awesome. It's great to see him back in victory lane, a place that he belongs. He's a true winner in this sport, and it's awesome to see him up there.
Let's switch gears a bit. Fast forward a week. Obviously, a slightly different package, the one that we're now starting to get ourselves accustomed to, and the Coke 600. Obviously, there is a topic that we have to address, and that is what brought out the last caution. The win by Martin Truex Jr., which really, if you look at it from where he was early in the race, it was a remarkable win by him, but not without controversy. So let's talk about the package and then talk about the racing this past Sunday evening at Charlotte, which, Sunday, I don't know about you two guys. I'm pretty sure I know what the answer is going to be. To me, the Sunday before Memorial Day is the greatest sports day of the year. We get to wake up in the morning and have breakfast with Formula One, and then we get to have lunch with the Indy 500, and then for us here we do a barbecue and we have our dinner with the Coke 600. So Sunday evening, Coke 600 won by Martin Truex Jr. Anthony, your thoughts on what we saw Sunday night?
Okay. I'm actually going to throw this one to Peter first. I want to hear what he has to say about this topic.
Okay.
All right, so I'll lead the charge on this one. Coke 600. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see most of it live. I ended up catching most of it on the replay after getting back from the Indy 500. But I was able to listen to it on my way out of the track with my brother on the MRN broadcast, part of SiriusXM NASCAR, which was phenomenal. I love listening to the races on the radio. For those new fans that are listening and watching our broadcast on YouTube now, if you never get the chance to experience a NASCAR race on radio, you're truly missing out. It's a very different perspective than watching it on TV or watching it live. And all of the commentators, they bring such an awesome energy. It makes you feel like you're right there. You can close your eyes and almost see all those cars. So from what I heard with the 600 early on, until I was able to catch up with the feed and the broadcast, was there was a great turnout. There was a lot of fans that were present, and that is awesome to see. You hear so often that NASCAR's struggling, they're hurting, viewership is down, attendance is down. What are they going to do? The sky is falling. It's awesome to see in the heartland, in what I call NASCAR land, whenever I get the chance to go to Charlotte or North Carolina. It's awesome to see that there was such a great turnout, a local turnout. And I'm sure there's people from all over there to go to the 600. That's awesome. As far as the product goes, different rules package, back to what we're normally seeing. And before we went on air, Anthony and I and Rick as well, we were all talking about how they've caught up to this package now. Since the West Coast swing, as Anthony mentioned before, and I don't want to take too much of his topic away, I'm sure he's going to bring it up, is, these cars, these teams have gotten these cars, and now we're starting to see the cream, as Darrell Waltrip would say, the cream's rising to the top halfway through the year. You can see who's legit, and you can see who's not so much. And after I finally caught up and I got to see the last two stages of the 600, it was an awesome race. It seemed competitive. I like that there was more cautions than normal. I never want to see anybody get hurt, and I know that that's the same for a lot of fans. Thankfully, nobody was, but I want to see these drivers push it on the edge and maybe gamble or bite a little bit too much and end up costing them. I think the restarts really bunched up the field and made these tight quarter racing a lot more exciting to see. I also liked how tires became a strategy. This is the longest race in our entire schedule. Some teams ran out of tires because of the above average level of cautions that we saw. So there was a lot to go on with it. Again, thanks to MRN for letting me listen to that broadcast while I was driving back. It seemed like it was very racy. I love seeing the new drivers up front, and then you got your clear favorites as well. So it was overall an exciting race. Again, part of that motorsports weekend. It was a good way to kind of cap all of that off after the Indy 500.
Yeah, I got to agree with you on that, Peter. I was able to catch some of the broadcast on the radio on the way home from a barbecue. Look, it's the longest race on the schedule. It's one of the most hyped races on the schedule for a reason. Um, there's been a few lackluster races in recent memory, but this race really delivered. This package, as we've seen ever since the West Coast swing, and it was something that we pretty much, I don't want to say predicted, but it's one of these things that we had an inkling was going to happen. Looking at the way that some of the teams were talking, with how they had to prepare for the beginning part of the year as opposed to this portion of the season that we're in right now, is that the teams, you can tell, are really getting a handle on the package as a whole. In the beginning part of the year for the West Coast swing and a few races after, the teams that really fired on all cylinders were the obvious teams, Penske and Joe Gibbs Racing. To me, that just meant that during testing at Vegas, they were the teams that just picked up the package quickest. They knew exactly what they needed to bring to the racetrack, and the other teams were still kind of guessing as to what to bring. We heard some guys saying we should have brought a car that wasn't trimmed out to the racetrack as opposed to one that was way too trimmed or that was way too trimmed. And that's what was hurting them. So I think you're seeing teams really get a handle, and that's why I think you're seeing better, improved racing as we go on. To me, the racing was very similar to Kansas. It had all of the good parts of Kansas and really none of the bad that Kansas had. You're starting to see the intelligent drivers make the moves that they need to get to the front rather than just the brute force moves. Um, I think that's allowing some of these drivers talent behind the wheel and inside the helmet really shine. You're seeing guys like Alex Bowman, who nobody ever would have thought would have had the success that he's had the last 4 or 5 weekends of racing. Really kind of take advantage, I think, of this package. Him and Greg Ives, and he's one of the first ones we've really seen know how to use the package to his advantage with the arrow that he's leaving the wake behind his car. And like Peter said, the cream is just rising to the top with these teams. We're going to see more racing at mile-and-a-half tracks, similar to what we've seen with Kansas and with Charlotte and with Texas and Atlanta. I think the racing is just going to get better. Charlotte as a whole was really nice. You saw the day to night transition, and you saw who was set up for the day racing, who was set up for the night racing. The transition and the teams having to keep up with the track was something that I don't think we've seen before. I think in the past races, we've seen a Coke 600 where you didn't really have to chase the track that much. Weather had been relatively fair. Grip levels had been relatively high. This was a really hot Coke 600. I think that's what led to a lot of the tire failures in the beginning of the race. It was a really hot track. It was a lot of downforce put down on these tires, and you started to see teams probably try to manage the daytime and then really unleash during the night racing. Martin Truex Jr., he's got a stranglehold on the mile-and-a-halfs for the last few years, especially at Charlotte. To see him and his team persevere through the tire failure, through the damage that he had, with a little bit of controversy, but it wouldn't be the Coke 600 if there wasn't a small little bit of controversy thrown in there. For him to come out on top just goes to show that you can work with this package, even if you get a little ding here and there. It's not showing like recent years where as soon as you get a fender rubbed in, you might as well just throw in the towel. You're not going to get the victory. Excuse me. It was nice to see unfamiliar faces in the top 10 at the end of the race. We had drivers like Chris Buescher. We had Ricky Stenhouse contending for a long time in the top 5, top 10. Austin Dillon was a strong Chevrolet. Chase Elliott, Alex Bowman were continuing their Chevrolet, leading the pack for Chevrolet. Harvick had his woes towards the end, but he showed some brilliance in the beginning of the race. Same thing with Penske, Keselowski before he ran into some trouble. I think this package is really coming in, but I think this is a package designed for the mile and a half, which is probably why we're seeing the short tracks at a weak point this year, especially at Bristol and Martinsville. But I think that's just kind of what we have to deal with for now. And a majority of the tracks are mile and a half. So I'll take exciting mile and a halves over anything really at this point, just because that's what we're being force fed with the schedule.
It's interesting you mentioned the mile and a halfers, and historically, we've talked about that on this show, that they do tend to look all the same, race very similarly. What I think we've found is that NASCAR has found the right combination to make the mile and a halfers exciting. We talked about the crowd at Charlotte, and good racing does that. Good racing brings out the people. It gets you TV ratings. It gets word of mouth going, where someone who probably would have said, I'm not going to spend all night watching this 600-mile race. It starts to bring people out when that racing is good. And I think that's what we've seen. The package seems to lend itself toward the thinking driver. The guy who's able, and we're going to talk about this in relation to Pocono Raceway, the guy who thinks 3 or 4 moves ahead of time, isn't so much, racing for the moment. This package really persuades the driver to think a little bit more than he otherwise might. Martin Truex Jr., as I said earlier, what a fantastic run for him, given all of the obstacles he had to overcome. That said, there was indeed controversy, and I'm going to throw a question out to the two of you, because MTJ had some issues along the way with Joey Logano in prior seasons. I'm just going to float my opinion out there. I think he's a great driver. He's obviously a really nice young man. I'm not a big fan of what he did down the stretch. I just am not real comfortable with when you creep up on somebody and you literally run right over him and create a caution. Nevertheless, he really did overcome an awful lot to get himself to victory lane. The question for the two of you is, and I'm going a little bit off script, and as you know, we like to be a little bit provocative on this show. Given some of these issues that we've seen, does MTJ now wear a black hat?
I think he's creeping in that direction. For me, he's not there yet, but he is ever so slightly stepping to the dark side. I would say last year's battle with. I think we got to look at last year's battle with Joey and go even further into the season and really look at what happened at the Roval with him and Jimmy Johnson. That last lap, last turn or two incident that he had with Jimmy, I understand why he turned Jimmy. I get it. I'm a Jimmy fan. I was not mad that he went and turned Jimmy the way that he did. You're going for the win. Jimmy messed up and cost Martin the win. I get it. I'd be mad too. Carry that over to what happened at Martinsville with Joey moving Martin and getting the win the way that he did with that dramatic drag race down the end. I think that was just Martin kind of internally just cursing himself out for letting, I guess, another one either slip by or get beat at the line for another victory. He kind of had to bite the bullet with what he said in pit road afterwards with, he might have won the battle, but he ain't going to win the damn war. I'm not going to let him win that championship. And Joey goes on and wins the championship. To me, what happened last year was just Martin being frustrated over 2 results and very possibly 2 victories that should have probably been his, with the exception of maybe Martinsville that you could have tossed up because he really did just get beat going to the line. This year he's been kind of quiet except for the last 5 races. He started off kind of slow. I'm going to attribute that to a transition to JGR being in-house instead of 2,000 miles away in Dover. I think the move will resonate in a lot of people's minds, and a lot of people are going to have flashbacks to last year and what he said and related to that. I think the two incidents last year have nothing to do with him inching towards a black hat. I think that was, or dark side. I think that was just him being super frustrated. And I understand that you're going for a championship. You're going for, he had the weight of Furniture Row on his back. You know, he wanted to bring that championship home one more time for Barney. This year, I think you can say this is probably the first incident, if he continues in this direction, to go that way. But on the flip side, you got to look at how quick they were. And it was if you agree with the move or not, it was pure genius to do it when you did because of the track position it gave him. Right. So you can't knock him for that. I do agree with you. You can't just run over somebody to create a caution, especially if it's to your advantage. I think we also kind of saw that, I think either at Kansas, or I think we might have seen it earlier in the race or during the Open with Denny. Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't talk about that, where he had a tire going down. Normally, when you have a tire going down, going into turn 3, you're on the apron. He started to go on the apron, turned onto the track, and spun just out of nowhere and created that caution, stayed on the lead lap. So I think a lot of people are overlooking that move. Martin is definitely taking a step towards the dark side with that, but it's ever so slight of a step for me. I don't even really pay any attention to what he did last year. Last year, that was Martin just being frustrated with 2 poor finishes that were very promising 100 feet before the line.
Peter, your thoughts?
I think I'll have to be a little bit more provocative on this one. I think last year, I think he started to wear the black hat. I think he had a chip on his shoulder after winning the title. You could hear it in his pre-post race and even in race reports, where he felt like he deserved certain positions. He deserved to be raced a certain way, which when you're the champion, I can say that's fair. Then he started having this kind of whiny persona that kind of came through. And I can agree with Anthony. All of that's justified. If you see it that way, that's completely fine. But then I feel like another fan base would feel that it's like, come on, like, shut up already. You're whining. You're not entitled. You don't own everything. You got performance. It's it's still a race at the end of the day. You want it. You got to earn it. If somebody moves you out of the way, you got to do the same to him. Initially, I had a problem with him doing that to Jimmy because I was like, all right, it's after the race. But then, NASCAR puts it on them. So I really didn't have a problem after it kind of cooled down. Everything's on the line. A win gets you to the next spot. Jimmy was in full send trying to get in there, and Martin's trying to get as many points as if he could possibly can as well. So it's completely justified in the nature of this elimination playoff format. Anybody in their right mind would be completely upset with, losing that opportunity right at the start finish line. So that 100% agree. The Joey versus Martin thing too, outside of the quote kind of biting him in the long run, as Anthony said before. Again, I can't really fault him there, for, riling up the crowd, because a few years earlier when Chase Elliott got caught by Denny Hamlin, we all rallied behind him saying like, all right, this is the moment where Chase is going to snap now. Now Chase is going to be different.
But Chase backed up his talk.
Oh yeah. Chase definitely
that's the difference between those two.
Absolutely. So it's like, I don't really blame him there, but the whining I feel like really started last year. He had echoed moments of that this past weekend too, where he said he was like, the 38 should drop to the back and give us a chance. It's like, no, they're out of tires. They're trying a different strategy. They're trying to get all the points they can get. Get up there and earn it. He did, and congrats to him for his second 600 win. But you don't own the track. And I could see that black hat really emerging because some people kind of get ticked off by that persona or that attitude. It got to a point, and that's true. That was his spotter, but it's getting to the point where it's like, everybody has one more or less feeling on Kyle Busch. overall. You either really like him or you really don't like him. I feel like his teammate is starting to kind of have those two cross lines as well. You're either going to be a Truex fan or you're not going to like Truex. So that move that he pulled on that car that was a lap down, it helped him out in the long run, got him into position to win the race, and he ultimately was able to earn it and go get it himself. But can't say I was a huge fan of that move. That's about all I'll say there, though. But he's got a good car. It was awesome to see the 19 car was battered and bruised, and he could still put it in victory lane. So that's a testament for NASCAR and this package as well, because we've been so accustomed to a car getting a little bit of aero damage and being completely killed for a race. So it was awesome to see that as well. He is one heck of a wheel man. You got to give him credit where credit's due, and he is on one of the best teams in the game right now. So that's about all I have to say about Martin.
That'll bear watching over the next several weeks. We'll see, just how this all plays out.
Now I have one quick question.
Sure.
Just so that we can see and predict what might happen in the future weeks. If Martin's coming up on somebody like Alex Bowman or even somebody like Ryan Newman, or not necessarily Denny Hamlin, but somebody of that caliber, somebody you're always going to see racing with you in the top 10, do you think he does the same move? Do you think he still dumps the car in front of him for that track position? Or do you think he said, I'm never really going to be racing this guy for a position ever unless I have to fall to the tail end of the lead lap? I can kind of get a freebie here. I don't really have to worry too much about retribution.
I think he would. I'll take that one real quick, and I want to give it to Rick. I want to hear what Rick has to say. I think he would, considering the circumstances. Playoffs, 100%. Crown Jewel race, definitely.
Well, he's already in the playoffs with 2 wins.
Yes, truth. Random 1.5 or another short track outside of the Bristol night race, I would say no. I wouldn't. I don't think he pulled on somebody that he knows has a lot on the line, because that person's definitely paying him back. I would say that move that he did on that lap down car, that's not getting paid back this week at Pocono. There's nothing besides haters getting getting excited about some car that has no shot at a playoff run or a race win doing something to Truex this week at Pocono. So that's what I think. Rick, what do you think about that?
No, I totally agree. I think there's zero chance of this any kind of retribution from what happened on Sunday night. On the other hand, I do believe that if this was one of the marquee drivers, whether it's someone who's a mid-pack driver or someone who is clearly destined for the top 16, there won't be anywhere Martin could hide. Agreed. And it would happen likely at the most opportune moment.
Yeah.
So
the other thing you got to think of is that 52 car can't afford to wreck himself to get back at him.
Exactly.
They're too small of a budget. Exactly. That team owner said, "Hey, let it go."
Let it go. Exactly. Shifting gears here, the double. We talk about it every year. We fantasize about it every year. If there's anybody on the circuit right now, and really the direction that you would think we would go is a NASCAR driver driving Indy and then driving the 600 rather than the other way around. Of the people that we see week after week, I'll ask 2 parts to this question. Who do you think could do it, and who would you like to see do it? And they could be the same guy. Peter, you want to go first?
Absolutely. This was something that my brother and I spoke about as we were driving back, as the Indy bug really bit him, and I was telling him that sometimes NASCAR drivers will attempt to do the double, mentioning Kurt Busch and Tony Stewart. So that got him talking, and he was like, "Well, who do you think could do it?" As you just proposed the same question, and I told him, I was like, "Well, the guy I think that can do it is not a guy I particularly care for at all. I think Kyle Busch can do it. His brother was very successful there. His brother up and had a chance to really, really, really win that race driving the Andretti equipment. Kurt really impressed a lot of people. And I think he did it at an opportune time. The DW12 cars that they ran a few years back, they were truly awesome to watch at Indianapolis. They really raced good. You can get a run on somebody really well. It just took that time to really understand the car and get it right. I think Kurt had a bad crash in one of the practices, and then after that, he really understood the limits of where he can push it and where he couldn't. I think his brother's just one heck of a wheelman. No matter what we see Kyle Busch in, whether it's the trucks, Xfinity, late models, snowball derby cars, anything on dirt, he's always been able to win, and even Cup Series cars. So I'd love to see him do it, even though I'm not a fan of him by any means. I think I certainly would be a fan of him for that race weekend. I'd be cheering for him come Indy 500. Who I'd like to see do it is my favorite driver. I don't think he has the pedigree or background for it, but I'd love to see a Hendrick driver do it. I'd love to see Chase Elliott climb into an Indy car and have my favorite driver in both of those races in the same day. It'd be really cool to pull for somebody like that. I wish Gordon did it back in the day. I wish Johnson did it, but I think it'd be cool to see Chase if he ever did and got the opportunity.
Anthony, your thoughts?
My choice of driver and my choice of who I think could actually pull it off is going to be different. I think I agree with Peter. I think Kyle Busch could definitely pull it off. He's hinted at wanting to. His tune has changed in recent times. He was asked about it a few years ago, I think when it was Kurt's year to run the 500. And he said, one of the reporters asked him, would you ever do the double? And he said, opportunity came, couldn't do it. And the reporter said, well, what do you mean by that? He's like, boss said couldn't do it. And they said, well, Joe said no. And he said, nope, got two bosses. One's my wife, one's my owner. You pick which one. And kind of just left it at that. Looked really pissed off at the same time. Like he really wanted to do it and just couldn't because somebody said no. I think
who that is.
I think it was Samantha.
I agree.
Just because I think this was actually just after he had the accident where he broke his legs. This is also just after James Hinchcliffe has his horrible accident in Indy 500 practice where he almost loses his life. There was a lot adding up to it. I think Joe would have reveled in the fact that Kyle Busch was running the double. I think Samantha was the one that said no for safety. His tune kind of changed this year when asked about it and said, if the opportunity presents itself, I'll do it, but I think the window is closing. Him and Jimmy both kind of had the same tune. Who I would love to see do it would be Kyle Larson. I think that he would be able to adapt to the IndyCar exceptionally well. I'm a firm believer, and I will stand by this, and I think history has shown that you can't be an IndyCar driver and drive one NASCAR race and be competitive. I think you can have somebody like Simon Pagenaud, James Hinchcliffe, Scott Dixon, whoever, run the Indy 500 and run the Coke 600, but they're going to be a lap down by the end of the race. It is way more difficult, I think, to adapt to a stock car, especially with the limited amount of practice you're allowed to have and the limited testing you're allowed to have as a race car driver in NASCAR. It's a lot more opportunity to learn an IndyCar leading up to the 500. So I think if you're ever in the history of sports going to see a driver go and win the Indy 500 and then win the Coke 600 on the same day, it's going to be a NASCAR driver. I don't think you're going to see an IndyCar driver come over unless it's somebody similar to a Juan Pablo Montoya where he comes over, runs a few seasons, gets experience, and then goes over and runs Indy. I don't think you can pull a full-time Indy 500 driver out of that field, put him in even the 18 car or the 19 car, and give him a shot in heck at winning the Coke 600 on the same exact day.
No, I agree with you. I agree. You know, as a public service announcement, every one of us who who has walked that very happy mile up the aisle, has a boss. And Anthony, you have one. I have one. Peter, you will soon have one. I agree. I don't think it was Coach that said anything. I think it was Sammy who said, "No way," and
Yeah.
she probably said it a little bit stronger than that. Peter, let's toss it back to you for some final thoughts on the topic of the double.
There's one last thing that came out this past week before the Indy 500 that I think really poses, I guess, a curveball in this double idea. IndyCar is partnering up with Red Bull, and they're creating a aero screen, which is going to go on the IndyCar. The aero screen is going to be something very similar to the Formula One halo that we see on those cars, but it's got more of like a fighter jet-esque kind of enclosed cockpit. I wonder if that added safety feature piques the interest of some of the guys like Kyle Busch and like Jimmy Johnson, who have been skeptical in the past because of those the risks and safety. So that was the one thing I wanted to bring up. I think if we see this car tested in real time, as time goes on throughout the rest of this year with this new aero screen, I think that may get a lot of NASCAR drivers really interested in trying to find a way to go over there. I wonder if that gets any of the Penske drivers, even though 2 out of the 3 are family men as well. I wonder if it gets either Logano or Keselowski really interested in trying to get into the captain's cars and giving it a shot at the double as well.
Interesting. Final word on the double, Anthony?
The only thing that I'll say that the last thing I'll say about Kyle, I don't know if the rule still stands at Joe Gibbs Racing for him, but after he did have that accident at Daytona in the Xfinity race, Coach told him no more restrictor plate races unless it's in a Cup car. So I don't know if that pertains to running Indy. If that does, then maybe both bosses said it. I feel it was Samantha because I think Coach sees the dollar bills that could be made from promoting a double for somebody like Kyle Busch. So if that's the only thing that might keep me thinking that maybe it was both, but I don't think it was solely Coach. I think it was solely Samantha.
Yeah. Well, we'll move on. Someday maybe we will find out. Final topic on Charlotte. There's been a lot of talk over the years about the length of the races. The 600 is obviously NASCAR's longest race. Should it be shortened? And I'm gonna just give my perspective very quickly. NASCAR has some iconic races. Obviously, the Daytona 500, and people outside of people like us and our viewers who are passionate about NASCAR and passionate about motorsports, everyone's heard of the Daytona 500. But for those who are on the inside and really love motorsports, there's also the Coke 600, the Southern 500, the night race at Bristol. What am I forgetting? The Brickyard. And those are races that I personally don't think we should ever tinker with. You know, you really don't want to change the face of historic significance. And I think the Coke 600 is one of those. It's the Ironman race. It really is. It's quite frankly, it's the race that separates the men from the boys because of its length, because of starting in daytime, ending at nighttime, changes in the track, changes in the way the tires react. It is really the most all-encompassing race we have on the schedule, more so than the Daytona 500, where so many factors come into play. I wouldn't change a thing. Anthony, what say you?
Don't touch the 600. Don't touch Daytona. Don't touch the Southern 500. Don't touch at least the Bristol night race. I'm not quite sure or convinced that the Brickyard has lengthy life left in the NASCAR schedule. But as long as it is on the schedule, don't touch the length of that race because of the historical significance of it. Um, Other races I could see shortening by 50 miles, 100 miles. I've even said in the past that I support some of these races going to a timed format, just so that you have a locked in time slot for TV, a locked in time slot for the people that are there. They know that the race starts at a certain time and they know it's going to end at a certain time, give or take maybe a manipulation of an overtime rule. Those marquee events, the Daytona 500, even possibly the summer Daytona race, whenever they schedule it, keep that at 400 miles. Keep the 600. Keep the 500-mile Bristol. Keep the 500-mile Darlington. And other than that, I think any racetrack is fair game, as long as the proper research is done to support the change. I don't want them just shortening a race for shortening's sake and seeing how it goes. As long as they have information and data to back up their decision, I'm perfectly fine with NASCAR making any kind of decision as far as shortening anything but those tracks that I mentioned. And
Peter?
Martinsville. I think Martinsville should stay a 500 miler.
Yeah, that's probably a good one too.
Especially because it's going night race. That's going to be exciting.
It is. It is. Peter, your thoughts?
Real short and sweet. Don't touch the crown jewels. I think they're special. Leave them alone.
Could not have said it better at all. So with Charlotte, 2 weeks at Charlotte in the rearview mirror, we come upon the Tricky Triangle, a place that all three of us are very familiar with, a place that we'll be visiting at the end of July, a place that has a tremendous number of challenges, regardless of what package you're running, but it should present some interesting racing this coming weekend with the package that we've become accustomed to this season. Anthony, thoughts on Pocono and not just the racing, but who do you see as someone to watch this coming weekend?
I think Pocono is going to be a completely different beast than we've seen in the past. I think the importance of turn 3 is going to be much greater than we've ever seen to set up that move into turn 1. Again, like I said, I think this package really likes multi-lane racing in the turns, which will assist in passes going down the Long Pond Straight. And that's all going to start in turn 3, possibly in turn 2, gaining that momentum and getting up to the bumper of the car ahead. We know notoriously turn 3 is not a multi-groove turn. Turn 2 really isn't for the most part either. So you're going to really, I think your excitement is going to be heading down the front straight, getting that huge draft going into turn 1, getting that multi-lane momentum and setting up for possibly a pass going into 2. If you can't complete it coming off of 1, that'll be a big place. But I don't see that straightaway between 2 and 3 being long enough to gain any kind of a draft. The only advantage you're going to have there is if you get off of turn 2 better. Who do I see being strong? I'm pointing towards the Hendrick guys and the usuals of Kyle Busch, Kevin Harvick, who we're going to talk about shortly. He's been pretty strong at Pocono. Doesn't have the wins really to show for it, but he is a strong contender there. Always brings a good package to the racetrack. I wouldn't be surprised if this is a race where you see Bowman pull out his first win. He had a strong showing last July. It was his first ever top 5. They've been gaining a lot of momentum this year. I don't think there's any questions that Hendrick has the power plant to contend with the rest of the field. I think Greg Ives and Alex Bowman are figuring this package out. I think it's going to play right into him and Elliott's hands. I think this is a great chance for Jimmy Johnson to pull off what I would think is his first top 5 of the year. Same with William Byron. He had a top 5 last year as well. I think he finished 5th. They're going to be strong. I think it's going to be a crapshoot between your Gibbs, your Stewart Haas Racing, and your Hendrick boys. But I would expect I'm gonna pick Bowman. I think he's due. I think this is a track where he can pull it off at.
Anthony, I'm sorry, but I'm looking right at you. You see, that's what happens when you get old. Peter, your thoughts on Pocono?
I think we're definitely in for a treat. I'm so excited to see this new package at Pocono. It seems like there's a lot of hype building up towards this race. Really stoked to see this in person when we go there in July. I can't wait. Hearing possibly no shifting, a lot of interchanging down those long stretches. Possibly going beyond 5 or 6 wide as those straightaways go really, really, really wide and stretch out. One guy that comes to mind, I have to agree with Anthony, is definitely Alex Bowman. He's been on the right trend. He seems to be performing really well. Hendrick's definitely stepped up their performance. They're bringing fast race cars each week. So that's somebody that's definitely on my radar as well. I'm going to go with one of his teammates. He started on the pole for the Coke 600. William Byron is going to be my guy that I'm watching out for. I don't know if William Byron will get the race win, but I think that he's trending in the right direction with Chad. They seem to be really hitting on something in the past few weeks, and I can't help to think if this Pocono race is going to be very similar to that Xfinity Indy race that he won, where those cars really sucked up to one another and almost had like this Indy type slipstream pass. I know William Byron to win that race. He studied a lot of Indy film, so I'd be really interested to see if he's going to have a little bit of a leg up on the closing rate that Pocono may offer this coming Sunday. So he's one to watch. Again, like Anthony said before, you're going to have your usuals. Kyle Busch will be in the top 5, top 10. Truex probably not far behind. The Penske car is probably not far behind. I know Harvick is statistically really good at Pocono as well, so this could be the week that Harvick breaks through and gets that win. And I know we'll talk about the standings in a little bit, but he's right there. He's extremely close. But I'll say William Byron's my one to watch.
Well, that's interesting. You folks have kind of pinged on Hendrick Motorsports, and they have proven themselves to be out of the doldrums that they had been in for quite some time.
It feels so good to be able to confidently pick a Chevrolet team week in and week out and think that know that they actually have a chance.
I am going to break ranks with you guys, even though you folks know I'm a bow tie guy. I will say that the winner on Sunday is going to be somebody from the Blue Oval camp, and I am picking Ryan Blaney to go to Victory Lane. He has been steadily learning this package. He is actually quite gifted at Pocono, and I think he is the driver to watch on Sunday. We will see. It is always a lot of fun to see the racing at the Tricky Triangle. It is a place that we are very familiar with. I've been going there for years. It is somewhere where the racing is better now that they have reduced the mileage. You don't get those long stretches where, everybody takes a little bit of a nap and then kind of wakes up for the last, 30 laps or so. The racing is a lot better there, and I think we will see more of the same and then some this weekend because of this package. I'm anxious to see, excuse me, how they set themselves up to come down that long front stretch and getting into turn one, which can be difficult in with any setup. But with this new setup, it'll be anxious to see exactly how those cars find their way down the front stretch at speeds probably more than we've ever seen before.
Yeah.
And into turn one.
Yeah, one thing I'm going to look for in practice is that shot coming down into turn one facing the straight. I want to see how, and it's been a notorious shot in the past with the cars yawed out coming down that straightaway. I want to see how many are just in a straight line just to get that straightaway speed. The other thing is the Pocono wild card may return this year. There is about a 35% chance of rain during race time, and it's going to be all day 35% chance. So let's see if it becomes a little bit of a pot of luck lottery win.
Well, that's true too, and whether and that is because the way that track is built, and we have experienced it ourselves going there. It is one of the most difficult tracks to dry, because not just because of its sheer size, but because it does not have generally and for folks who have never been there, it is set in the Pocono Mountains. It is in an absolutely beautiful location, but it is at this time of the year in particular. The weather can, in fact, be a bit cool. You don't get the drying effects that you get in places like Daytona or like Texas, where the air tends to be a lot warmer, and or in the case of Texas, a lot drier. So when moisture builds up in the Pocono Mountains, it tends to stick around. It makes it a very hard place to dry. They have had a notorious problem with weepers on the entry to pit road that have created all kinds of havoc at the track there over the years. So yes, if rain is a factor, it'll be interesting to see how the crew chiefs have a sense of urgency and the drivers get that message from their pit boxes as to setting themselves up for what could be a shortened race.
The original Roval.
It is indeed, as they say, and if you've never been there, there's a big painting on, well, kind of between 3 and the entry to that front stretch that simply says, "What turn 4?" So it's an exciting place. We're looking forward to it, and this package should bring some great racing from Pocono. We want to talk a little bit about Kevin Harvick, and we have talked about him over the past several weeks. He is 4th in points. At what point do we think there's a sense of urgency for Happy to get himself into victory lane? You want to tackle that first, Anthony? Are we there?
Yeah. No, I'll take it. I was just. I wasn't moving.
Are you there?
No, I'm there. I'm there. I was thinking.
I know you're there. I can see you.
I think.
Are we there yet? Are we there yet?
If you look at his position in the standings right now, he's 25 points behind Kyle Busch with 3 less wins, and 3 less top 10s. So for him to be in the points position he's in, I'm not that concerned about his safety in the playoffs, or going into the playoffs. I'll bet the farm that he'll make the playoffs.
Yeah.
If he doesn't win by Pocono 2, by the race that we're going to in July, I think you're going to see them throw the kitchen sink to try to get that win, because we have seen how important that position in points can be in the playoffs. I'm not super worried. I'm not super scared, because a lot of this is all comparison to the year that he had last year, which by all means was not a Kevin Harvick year. That was a one-off. He'll probably never have that kind of season again. So I can see him winning a race before the playoffs start. If it's not by Pocono 2, maybe it's a place like Watkins Glen. He has won there. He's won at Sonoma. So I can see him pulling off a win somewhere there. Not super stressed about it if he doesn't pull it off by then, but I think if he doesn't pull it off by Pocono 2, I think you start seeing them try some really drastic things to get that win, just because of the simple importance of what a win is in the standings.
Yeah.
Either way, I think he'll be fine the first 2 rounds just based off of points alone. The only point that it'll really start to worry for him is maybe trying to get into that 3rd round without having those wins there towards the end of the season. But I think you can confidently see him maybe pull a win out by Pocono 2. He's got some pretty good tracks. He's won at Chicagoland. He's won at Sonoma. Not Sonoma. Sonoma and Finian. and he can always pull off a win at Daytona. So, not super worried. I think it's a little unfair to be saying he's having a bad year, just because he hasn't won yet. There's a lot of drivers in that field that would love to have the year that Harvick is having. Um, but if I had to throw out a race, it's Pocono too. I think he has to win by Pocono too, for people to stop talking about it.
Peter, your thoughts on Happy Harvick?
I mean, to follow up on Anthony's points there, I mean, you couldn't ask for a more perfect response, honestly. I agree. I think it's way too soon to sound the alarm. Again, you look at the year he's having. He's been super consistent. He's led laps. He's been very, very present in the stage points. He's had good finishes. He hasn't had the bad finishes, which is good if you're a Happy Harvick fan. Just the wins aren't there. And again, to be as close to Kyle Busch, who we can look back at this half of the season and be like, this guy is dominant. This guy is scary, and he's going places. Some could probably even argue maybe he's almost got his spot locked into that Final Four just with the way he's been running since Daytona and back in February. But with Harvick, I think it's just way too early to panic. When you're typically running like this, the wins are going to come. If you're a driver who's proven time and time again that you can get those wins, they're going to happen. It's just a matter of time. Like Anthony said, he's got a really great arsenal of tracks that are coming up. Sonoma is the one that I have circled. As different NASCAR outlets are talking about, SHR and Harvick's performance. Nobody seems to really be mentioning Sonoma, and he was in that whole battle with Martin Truex with getting snookered on pit road last year. He could very well get redemption this time, and that could be the track that kind of puts him right back in there. Just kind of a little segue from that, because I think Harvick's going to be fine. A lot of different NASCAR media outlets are comparing the performance of Hendrick Motorsports to SHR. And the general fan consensus seems to be that Hendrick Motorsports they would put in the better position right now compared to Stewart-Haas. I think that's a lot about more of the "what have you done for me lately" type mentality, where we see the consecutive second place finishes from Bowman. We've seen a Chase Elliott victory at Talladega. We've seen William Byron get a pole and Jimmy Johnson finish inside the top 10. But I still feel that Stewart-Haas has the advantage. I feel Harvick's having a phenomenal year outside of the wins. I think Suarez, we've seen a much better Daniel Suarez than we've seen in his entire tenure at JGR. I think Eric Jones is the one that I would kind of raise my eyebrows and say, there's a little concern there, but he's a Gibbs guy. So I don't really want to compare him too much, but I'm comparing Suarez to him. Boyer's been good. Amarola's been phenomenal. Amarola, since he's arrived in that 10 car, has made that 10 car a legitimate threat. So I think that if you're comparing Stewart-Haas and Hendrick Motorsports, even though Hendrick's got the one win, and in recent times they look like they're actually turning the corner and they're becoming the Hendrick that we know and love. I think Stewart-Haas is still the better team. I think Harvick's win is coming, and I think his teammates are not short behind him.
I keep thinking about next week and how good the Fords have historically been at Michigan. And I have to tell you, I wouldn't be surprised if we see Kevin Harvick in victory lane at Michigan. I just have that feeling that because of the way the Fords perform there historically, we're going to see a Ford in victory lane next week at Michigan.
I tend to agree with that. I think that could happen for sure. But then again, with the field tightening up the way that I see it, I don't think it's as much of a guarantee, but I'm not saying it won't happen.
Last topic for this evening, guys, and it kind of keeps with our discussion on Kevin Harvick. We are at that halfway point through the regular season. We have had multiple guys that have had multiple wins. The question is, who really needs to step it up? And have we already seen all of the winners we're going to see in 2019. And if we haven't, we've already talked about Harvick. Besides Kevin Harvick, who do we see getting themselves into victory lane?
I'll take this one. Who needs to step it up? Two drivers right now. One, I think, is in danger of losing a seat. One, I think, just needs to start living up to the hype that's been surrounding him. I think the latter of those two is Austin Dillon. He's 21st in the points right now. He's shown flashes of brilliance in practice and qualifying, but practice and qualifying don't get your points on Sunday. He's had some pretty decent finishes, but he hasn't had the stage finishes to really back that up. Only has, I believe, 2 top 10s, no top 5s. Looks like he's almost 70 points out of the playoffs right now. And that's my mistake earlier. I was looking at projected points for the end of the season. Harvick right now is 50 points out of first, even with the 0 victories. The one driver I think really needs to step it up for his own good is Eric Jones. You got the 11 car, the 18 car, and the 19 car have all hit victory lane multiple times this year. At the beginning of the year, the speculation was that for Christopher Bell to move up, it was going to have to be Denny Hamlin out. Right now, Denny Hamlin, I think, has pretty much sealed his fate with Joe Gibbs for the next few years, and Eric Jones is kind of swimming without any floaties right now, swimming for his life for a seat at JGR. The only thing is, if he loses his seat at JGR, there's not really a quality ride that's about to open up for him anytime soon. Joe Gibbs has to pull the trigger on somebody like Christopher Bell, or else somebody else is going to steal him for a different Xfinity team. Who's my surprise for performance? I would say Kurt Busch. I didn't think he was going to pick up that quickly with a team that has the bow tie emblem on it. I wasn't expecting them to have the speed that they did. If anything, it was Larson that I thought was going to be in that position, and Kurt in the position Larson's in. I think Larson's going to pick it up, so I don't think he has to. I think he just naturally is going to pick it up as the season goes on. He might squeak into the playoffs. Right now, he's sitting a little bit on the bubble, but my do or die for the end of this year is going to be Eric Jones. I think he's got to pull off like a solid victory at a track not like Daytona. I think he's got to go out there and he's got to go earn a win, really like go out there and show that he's going to win a race in order to save his seat and keep Bell in the paddock for an extra season. But if you're Joe Gibbs, you're really itchy to pull the trigger on somebody like Christopher Bell. So we'll see. My pick for pick it up is going to be Eric Jones.
Peter?
That is an excellent pick. For my guys, looking at the point in the schedule and how things are right now, my guy to pick it up is Jimmy Johnson. I feel like Jimmy Johnson is in that position where he's on thin ice right now. Not in terms of his job, but in terms of making the playoffs this year. Something he's never missed in his entire racing career or cup career. He's sitting 14th in points now after a solid running at the Coke 600, and some luck with Eric Jones struggling and among some others. Jimmy's finally got himself back in there. I don't think that's enough right now. Just looking back at from 16th, which is Kyle Larson, to about 20th or 21st. There's really about 13 points or so that separate most of those drivers. It's a very, very small margin. I feel like that's going to be one of the things to look for all throughout the summer is the who's in and who's out, as we see drivers that have won before probably start winning multiple races. To answer Rick's point from before, I don't think we've seen all of the winners so far. Like we mentioned before, I feel like Kevin Harvick's right there. Kyle Larson, he won a non-points race in the All-Star. I think that he's going to win a points race. I think he's got that confidence now. He knows he can get it done. The performance and the input that Chevrolet has now given their bow tie teams seems like they've caught up to the other two. So giving Kyle Larson a decent piece to go and get it done seems like something that's a possibility. So there's two drivers at least on my radar. Again, Alex Bowman, I'd hate to cut him short. I really think that if it's going to happen, it could very well happen this year. Still, verdict is out on William Byron. I have to see a little bit more from him. But I think there's a few drivers that can still get it done. So I definitely don't think we've seen all the winners yet. But as far as picking it up, I really think Jimmy needs to. Again, Anthony makes excellent points with Eric Jones. He was somebody who I would say maybe if you go back a month, he seemed like a shoo-in. He seemed like he was a lock to be in there. And probably over if we go back a month ago, we would have raised our eyebrows or questioned us even mentioning Alex Bowman before his string of consistent finishes and much more competitive racing. So it's crazy how in a month's time it's really switched. But Eric Jones has got to be feeling the hot seat. Anthony brings up an excellent point with Christopher Bell waiting in the wings because Christopher Bell has done phenomenal in everything he's been in so far. To lose that talent would be devastating to Joe Gibbs Racing and Toyota, for that matter, just not having a good seat for him. So I think Denny has definitely solidified himself in the 11 car after winning a second Daytona 500 and being competitive, having 2 race wins in this year. So Jones has to really find something, or he could very well find himself in a very similar position to Daniel Suarez or worse, getting sent out from one of the top tier teams and not really finding his footing elsewhere. Looking at the standings as well, somebody who I think really needs to pick it up would be I think Daniel Suarez as well. Daniel Suarez, he's shown glimmers of immense talent in this Stewart-Haas racing car. He didn't seem like the best fit for the driver lineup that they had over at that team when the announcement was made. I didn't think he would gel really well with Clint Boyer and Kevin Harvick, but he seems to have really found his own there. The communication seems to be really well. And we can clear as day see his performance has increased, but he's gonna have to find that that extra gear like Eric Amarola did and get that car into victory lane. Stewart-Haas Racing is a top team. They're gonna find their way very, very soon. He's somebody that, again, early on in the season, good consecutive finishes, good runs, and he was well within the playoffs. Now he's in that very tight race towards the bottom. He's somebody else. If he has a couple bad days and somebody like Jimmy Johnson or Ty Dillon or Austin Dillon has some good ones, we're gonna see these standings flip flop. My last guy that I want to talk about has put together some solid runs, and I think it's because of his newfound teammate. Is I think Ricky Stenhouse Jr. is somebody that's got to watch and see if he can continue this run and not make those overly aggressive mistakes that can cost him in this playoff race. But he's somebody that if he could find a little bit more, he could very well be in the mix with all of this. And I think Ryan Newman being at Roush Fenway Racing has really elevated the performance of that team.
Yeah, I don't see anybody in the next few weeks getting bounced out of the top 16 by a victory. I think you're going to see inside of that top 16, top 17. They're the drivers that I think can reach victory lane. I'd be surprised if it was somebody outside of that bubble.
I do agree with Peter on both Stenhouse and Newman. I think that you've got to see them kind of finish the deal somewhere. They've had some good flashes, but have come away empty in every single attempt. A guy that I really think has to, and he's already in the playoff hunt, but I think he has to step it up beyond what we saw early in the season, and that's Clint Boyer. He's had a tremendous season so far, but I think he needs to find the consistency that he had much earlier in the year. He finishes top 10, but he's not quite there. Tracks that I think you're going to see him shine at will be some of the flatter tracks that are more conducive to his style of driving. I think What is it? When do we go to Loudon? I'm looking at the schedule.
Is it August?
I believe so. Um, that's that's a track that's notoriously good for him, going back to his days in the Xfinity series. Um, if he can wrestle away Loudon from people like his teammate Kevin Harvick and Joey Logano, Loudon could be a place where we see Clint Boyer get himself into victory lane this year. Um, Other than that, I think we're going to see additional winners, um, but I don't believe you're going to see a seismic change from the 16 we see currently in the playoff picture. And that's kind of interesting. One of the things that NASCAR has attempted to do with this entire structure of a regular season and then playoffs was to get away from the way it used to be many, many years ago, where the playoff picture was decided by early summer. Well, guess what? Playoff picture is starting to look pretty clear by when?
Oh yeah.
Early summer. So, all of the attempts at changing things around for excitement purposes really haven't changed a whole lot, in my opinion. But I think there's some exciting races that are coming up because of the package, because of the types of places we're going to. I can't imagine what the speed will be like in Michigan. That's going to be a fun race to watch. Coming up over the next couple of weeks, guys, we have got to talk about, before it's too late, about the impact that Darrell Waltrip has had on the sport. He's down to 3 races left with Fox. And I'd like to dedicate some time over one of our next couple of shows to talk about old DW. I know he is a somewhat polarizing figure, but his contributions to our sport cannot be overlooked, and they can't really be overstated, whether it be as a driver, as an announcer, or as just a goodwill ambassador for this sport. So something that our viewers need to be mindful of as we unfold the next 3 weeks. The last 3 weeks, he's going to be on the Fox broadcast.
Absolutely.
With that, we're out of time for tonight. A very ambitious schedule. We had a lot to catch up on. We hope the viewers really enjoyed it. Anthony, tell us all about how you can best participate as a member of the 3 Wide audience.
Same situation as always, guys. If you come across our content and you like the type of videos that we're putting out, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Right next to it, hit that bell icon. The bell icon will give you instant notifications and emails as to when we schedule a live event and when we do go live. Look for our posts on Chase Elliott Nation on the fan Facebook page. Again, major shout out and props to them for letting us use their forum as a way to advertise our channel. And if you have any questions, comments, support, or just topics that you like to see us talk about, just throw it in the comment section in the videos. We do check fairly regularly, almost daily, to see if you guys are leaving any feedback. And just any and all comments and criticism is appreciated. We still do have the rookie stripes on, so we are a fairly new channel. Anything to help us grow, improve, and expand would be greatly appreciated.
Now, the last official word about tonight's show is that 100% of these topics, and we hope the viewers love these topics and enjoyed hearing our take on them, 100% of them were put together by Peter. And Peter, you did an absolutely spectacular job of giving us these topics for discussion this evening. And I know that the viewers appreciated it. I know I did. I know Anthony did.
Yes.
And you just did a marvelous job with giving us tremendous food for thought over the past 2 weeks as we watch things unfold at Charlotte.
Thank you guys. I mean, it was a lot of fun. I just I didn't think I was doing anything special. I figured, it's been a while. We had a lot going on, three of us in our lives. Just try to come together with some of the things that just kind of popped into my head. I figured, oh, this is something that I think Anthony brings a really good insight to. I think this is something that Rick's got a really good pulse on, and I'd really like to talk about that. And then I have to give credit where credit's due with my own brother. I would have never thought of bringing the double idea to the table because we really haven't heard much ground other than Larson kind of bug and chip to do it every now and then. It was a lot of fun, and I can't wait to dissect Pocono and see how this first race of Pocono, our second, or I guess our first official race of like the summer session in NASCAR is going to kind of take off. So I'm really excited to see where we go from here.
Well, I'm looking upstairs toward the spotter stand, and he is saying that it's time to go. And as we always say, until the spotter tells you that all is clear, you have to remember that you're
3 wide.
So for Anthony, for Peter, I'm Rick. So long, everybody. Have a great week, and we will see you at the Tricky Triangle. Good night, everybody.